Good morning, everyone. We're very happy that everyone could join us here today for the 17th, it's pretty impressive, 17th annual Olin Awards celebration and luncheon. And we're so thrilled that Olin and WashU are a part of this really unique and special program. For those of you who don't know, the Olin Award was started in 2007 by Dick Mahoney, who is the Distinguished Executive in Residence here at Olin and the former CEO of Monsanto. It was Dick's vision to reward research that was generated by faculty of Olin that had the greatest potential to enhance business results. And each year there is a competition in which the most impactful research on this dimension is identified and rewarded, as we are doing today. This year, we received 16 submissions from our Olin faculty members, and we have two winners that we're going to talk about in a moment. We're very grateful for Dick Mahoney's vision and support for this award throughout the years and into the future. I think it's one of the most unique research kind of programs that we have here at Olin. The winners are selected by a committee of business executives who look at the research. They read all of the submissions, and they're looking for its impact on business results. I want to thank all the folks who participated in the judging and everyone on the staff who helped facilitate that, as well as the program today. The award comes with, it's not a golf tournament. We do have a big check though. A $25,000 honorarium and a crystal award, and the addition of the winners' names to a recognition plaque that we have in Simon Hall in the faculty lounge. It's a very prestigious award here at Olin, and we're very proud of the research that is submitted. In just a few moments, our winners for this year, Nick and Durai, will take us through the research that they submitted that won them the 2024 award, and we'll all learn about each of their papers. I'm going to say the titles: Internal Network Structure and the Speed of Generative Appropriability. And that's Nick's paper. And then Management of Resource Sharing in Emergency Response Using Data-Driven Analytics. And that's Durai's paper. Once again, thank you for your time today, both in person and virtually, and supporting this community. The quality of our faculty is inspiring here at Olin, not only in terms of their kind of intellectual capital, but also in the sense in which what they do in their research is applicable to real world business issues. This is a strategic priority for Olin, and we appreciate the exceptional faculty who contribute to this effort. Let me start the program off by introducing our first presenter and award winner, Nick Argyris. Nick is the Vernon W. and Marion K. Piper Professor of Strategy. He's been part of our faculty here at Olin since 2008. Nick is currently teaching in Shanghai, so he can't be with us in person today, but no matter. We have a recording of his presentation that we're going to play, and then Nick is going to join us via Zoom live from Shanghai, to do Q&A live following his video. So think of some good questions. And without further ado, please help me welcome and congratulate Nick Argyris. Okay, so we're going to play the video, correct?
Hello, I'm Nick Argyris. Sorry could not be here with you teaching in Shanghai this week, but I'm pleased to present this research that I carried out with my colleagues Luis Rios and Brian Silverman, and I want to thank the Olin Award team for their bestowing of this award. This research is about how companies can better build on their own innovations before their rivals do. I want to start with an example. This molecule is called boceprevir. It was invented by the pharmaceutical company Merck for its hepatitis C treatment. But Merck did not realize that this molecule could also be useful in COVID treatments, whereas Pfizer did, and Pfizer used it in its Pavlovid drug, which is earning billions of dollars, while Merck stands on the sidelines. So this suggests that building on your innovations before the rivals do can be really important. And we look at one particular factor that might be important in determining a company's ability to build on its own innovations: the internal structure of its inventors. Here's a quotation that I want to read to you. Quite often, an indication may be unsuccessful in one therapeutic domain, but have legs in another. However, with the wrong structure, they may not be able to take advantage of this. So we're going to be interested in, does the structure of a firm's internal inventor network affect the speed at which it builds on its innovations? And by internal inventor network structure, we're talking about patterns of co-authoring patents in a company that's very large. Who patents with whom, how frequently, and are those inventors connected to each other, or are they more dispersed? We find that networks that are more integrated, where there's more connectivity between researchers in terms of their co-patenting activity, they're able to build on their innovations faster than others. And network integration is measured by these patterns of co-authorship, and I'll talk about 3 different measures of integration that we use. And then your ability to build quickly on your innovation is measured by the timeliness of your self-citations to your own patent families. Citations mean referring to your own patents in your future patents. And particularly, we emphasize patent families rather than individual patents, and I'll talk about that later. Our sample consists of over 1,400 large companies between 1986 and 2019. And to emphasize, our research, therefore, covers lots of industries, not just pharmaceuticals, which was the example I gave you, but any industry where there's active patenting in the US. Machinery, electronics, computers, food processing even, chemicals, et cetera. Here are some examples of companies with less and more integrated networks. So on the left, you can see, here's a company where you have 4 groups of researchers. Each of the little dots represents a researcher or inventor connected to another by a co-patenting relationship. And you can see that those groups are pretty dispersed, whereas in firm B, you can see some of the groups are connected to each other through a co-patenting relationship. So we'd say firm B has a more integrated network. Why are integrated networks important? Well, we think it's because they facilitate flows of information about what researchers in other parts of the company are doing. And this can be very important for large companies. One set of researchers may have no idea what other sets of researchers are doing, but if they're connected through co-patenting relationships, they may be more aware of what others are doing. And they may be able to transmit knowledge that isn't written down anywhere. It's not well documented. That might include knowledge, for example, about prior failures. So we think that information is going to flow more freely in large firms that have connected networks. And that's going to help them build on their innovations faster. And speed matters, of course, because everything diffuses eventually. Innovations get copied. And so innovating firms really have limited time to build on their own knowledge before rivals start to do so, as we saw in that example with Pfizer and Merck. Here is the first integration measure we use called entropy. Entropy is an inverse measure of concentration. So you see on the left-hand side, you have these dispersed groups, whereas on the right-hand side, some of those groups are connected to each other. So we would call the network on the right-hand side more integrated, and on the far left-hand side, less integrated. And the one in the middle would be average, middle in terms of integration. Another network measure we use is called giant component, that measures the number of groups in the most connected component. On the left-hand side, you can see 3 out of the 8 groups are connected, whereas on the right-hand side, 7 out of the 8 are connected. So we'd say the company on the right has a more integrated network. And our third measure is called small worldliness. Small worldliness measures the extent to which a company has tight clusters of inventors that are linked together through bridges, but not every cluster is necessarily linked to every other. If there's too much of that integration, that's called random or disordered, which would be on the far right-hand side of this graph. A small world is the one in the middle, and a lattice is one where there are lots of clusters, but they're not connected. We look at patent application families and rather than individual patents, because patent innovations are often protected by many patents, and we want to look at a company's ability to build on its own innovation, not necessarily build on any single patent. For example, Keytruda, which is a cancer treatment, has 129 patents associated with it. Many of them are kind of minor, so building on them is not particularly important. We want to also take into account other impacts on a company's willingness or ability to build on its own innovations. So we take into account a number of characteristics of a patent family. That might help determine whether a firm is interested in building on that innovation and able to. We take into account a number of characteristics of a firm that might tell you whether that firm is more or less able or interested in building on its own innovation. So we're doing a regression analysis that includes a lot of these control variables. We also did a check to make sure that companies were really self-citing the patents that are most important and have the most potential to lead to an innovation that's valuable. And so we use these additional measures, I won't go through them, but additional measures of patent value as a check, and they do correlate quite well with a company's rate of self-citation. So here are the results in just 2 graphs. Let me explain those graphs. So the top graph relates to companies that have networks that are not very well integrated. There's a lot of dispersion in their inventor network. The blue line reflects the average citations to the company's patent families by anyone other than the firm itself. And the red line reflects the average citations by the company itself to its own patent families. So as you can see, prior to year 5, there really isn't much difference between the 2 lines. Maybe the blue line exceeds the red line, maybe starting around year 4, but the red line is not much different than the blue line, and there's no significant difference there, suggesting that the company is not citing its patents any faster than others are citing them. Therefore, we would say that the companies with the networks that are not well integrated are not getting any particular advantage, no particular head start in building on their own innovations. Whereas, if you compare that to the graph below, you'll see that all these lines both relate to companies whose internal inventor networks are highly integrated. You can see there's a difference between the red line and the blue line, and in particular, the red line is higher than the blue line, showing that these companies are able to cite their patent families faster to a greater extent than rivals and others. But by the time we get to year 5, the blue line starts to exceed the red line, meaning that others are now citing the company's patent families even more than the company itself. So this suggests that there's a company that's got a temporary advantage, but 5 years is a pretty good advantage to have. If you've and again, you get that advantage by having a more integrated internal inventor network. So how do you get a more integrated network in a large company with hundreds or maybe even thousands of researchers? What we suggest is that managers should use a number of different tools to try to nudge the organization toward a more integrated network. It's not something that can be done overnight, but through hiring and firing and promotion decisions, through decisions about who to assign to what kind of geographic location, maybe through some incentives, the company can sort of nudge the organization toward a more integrated network. In prior research, we showed that when companies centralize their formal R&D structure, the reporting relationships for R&D, then you see the network getting tighter, more integrated, but only after about 5 years. So this is a slow process, but of course that's only one tool. A company can combine these tools to sort of achieve that integration. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Hello, I'm Nick Argyris. Sorry could not be here with you, teaching in Shanghai this week, but I'm
Good morning. Sorry about the hour over there. In your research, or my experience is that even in recent history, discovery units, research units are not effectively connected using modern information technology. What's your thoughts on the role of information technology and perhaps even AI in terms of creating better information integration within a organization that would basically accomplish the same concept as your integration? You're muted.
That's a great question. Let me suggest a couple of things. First, so our research shows that getting researchers to work together on patents who maybe didn't do so before, creating new relationships is important for being able to build on your own innovations. And how you make those connections between researchers, that could be done through information technology of the kind we're using now, like Zoom, for example. You can imagine global seminars with researchers from around the world sharing their results in companies. Some companies may probably do that, and some may do it better than others. So I would say, yeah, sort of communication technologies, I think are effective. I think people have tended to find that knowledge databases are often not used so historically have not been used very well. Researchers don't tend to search them, but maybe something like large language models will make it easier for researchers to search up what people are doing elsewhere in the organization, the large organization, and as you say, substitute a little bit for actually getting together and meeting frequently. So I guess my answer is yes, I do. I do think there are opportunities for technology to sort of substitute here for helping to build these connections between researchers that are seem to be important.
Hey Nick, Jeremy. I have a. Does it matter what's the order of all the authors? In the sciences, often you have the first author doing most of the work, and then the later authors will facilitate the resources. I assume in a company slightly different. It could be that the later authors are supervising the budget, but are not doing the details of the work. And this would have implication as to how you are best integrating. Is it by having a supervisor who's all the patents, or is it by having the actual workers doing most of the work? And a related question is, in some of the startups, the CEO is actually signing all the patents. In fact, we have major scandals of this nature. Would that be a bad integration? Are there cases where you can identify this type of integration is not working as planned?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So we unfortunately in the data, it's not indicated which, how much work each patent co-author put into the project. And we're dealing with literally, we have a database of millions of patents, so there's no way to tease it out. But certainly, what I would say is that factor that you discussed probably creates some noise in our data, because there may be some researchers that look like they're connected, but they're really not, because their names are just added. So, but what I would say is that that only becomes a big problem for us if it creates bias in our data, because those names are more frequently added in companies where we observe a lot of network integration, and less so when there's less integration. And I don't think there's a particular reason to think that there's that bias in the data. Just probably just introduces some noise. And was there I think there was a second question second part to your question that I maybe missed? Oh, you said something about problematic CEOs adding their names. Yeah, so the other thing I'd say is that this research really applies to large companies that are trying to manage hundreds or thousands of researchers that are at risk of becoming isolated from each other just because of sheer size. I think it doesn't apply so much to startups or small companies where it's much easier, where people are working together every day. And that's, of course, one of the big advantages of startups is that you don't have the challenges of managing a large organization, large bureaucracy.
Thank you, Nick. We have a question from online. This is Dorothy, and the attendee isn't saying who they are, but they would like to know how you would characterize Apple's R&D under Steve Jobs, as they are known to be siloed.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that Apple's very secretive about their structure. And so it's very hard to know really what's going on there. I do know they have centralized R&D unit, but there could be silos within the central R&D unit. I don't know. It would certainly be, if our researchers at Apple are not highly connected, it would go against our hypothesis. I believe in our data we show that I think Apple is one with a pretty high level of integration in our data, but that would be a good one for me to double check make sure that that's true, because of course Apple's been very good at building on their own innovations.
Nick, David Meyer, question about your small world. One could think of two alternative hypotheses for this. The connectors, on one extreme, the connectors are really the elite of each of the groups, and they connect the other groups. The other alternative is that maybe it's just a random. Those are the two extremes. Where would you stand on this, given your research?
Well, as I said, in our data, we don't have on our pattern, we can't identify who was more senior or who is maybe more elite or who did more work on patent. We just have the names. So, I can't quite speak to that, the nature of the connection. But what I would say is generally what we show is that the ideal form of organization for building on your own innovations looks like something that Herbert Simon called a near decomposable structure, which is tight clusters where some of the key clusters have a bridge between, and the bridging researcher could be someone, a more senior person, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in our research.
Hey, Nick, Brad Larson here. Great research. This is fascinating. I guess I was curious. We're always interested when we find out a relationship, whether there's something unobserved that's leading to this relationship, right? Besides, is there something different about the kind of inventions that have a highly integrated inventor network, and that also then tend to get cited by the inventor company itself. And you included lots of controls you were describing there. So I guess I'm curious, what were some of the things you included there, and the concerns that you were addressing that would have been things that without those controls would have been problematic?
Yeah. Well, I think I wouldn't, I don't, what doesn't come to mind is a control that's particularly more important than others. We do think that, sort of patent family characteristics, the breadth of the patent, particularly like a control. One of the controls you have is the number of citations in the patent to a publication, which is a measure of sort of how basic the patent is. We might think that would tend to lead company to, you might self-cite more of a basic patent than a very applied one because it has broader applicability. So that's an example of, I think, a robust control. The econometric concern that, we were more worried about is just the potential endogeneity of network integration. Obviously, it comes it's as a result of a number of choices that management makes over years. However, we just tend to think that moves very slowly, and as I said, as a result of numerous, hundreds of decisions probably made by different parts of the organization. So I think at the same time, we're interested in giving managers advice about how to make choices that affect it. So that's a little bit of part of the problem of strategy, is that you're studying choices, and those choices by definition are endogenous, and it's very hard to quite get the exogenous shocks that you would ideally like to have to examine causal relationships. So yeah, this is more correlational, and we're hoping that the controls are enough to produce at least a reasonable preliminary, if not definitive, set of correlations.
All right, Nick. As you all know, Mr. Mahoney was unable to join us today, but he does have a question from online. Nick, is there any other measure besides patents that would work with this model?
Well, the beauty of patents is that they're objectively observed, and they're pretty comprehensive in terms of their coverage. So I think the beauty of this research is that we can look at 1,400 companies, millions of patents. It's a pretty extensive coverage. Companies sometimes don't patent, of course. They use trade secrets and those, by definition, we can't observe those outcomes, innovation outcomes. They're by definition secret. What I would say is that to me, the next best measure would be email correspondence between researchers. There are some folks in organization theory who have gotten email data from companies, but not about innovation, about other types of organizational issues. Of course, companies are very reluctant to give up email data, and you tend to get it only for a few companies at best. Whereas here, as I said, we get 1,400. So I don't think there's a good substitute for patent data, but I'd love to, if anybody's willing to give up email correspondences for their company. I can imagine an interesting case study that uses that kind of data.
Okay, Nick, you answered all the questions. You did amazing. And we appreciate you joining from Shanghai, and congratulations on your Olin Award winning paper. Thanks. Thanks to
Thank you,
Nick,
Mike.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know if he's still on there, but I'm planning to use the floating Nick Okay, let's see. Oh, please direct follow-up questions. You're there still, Nick. Okay, good. You heard that. All right. Okay, so with Nick having presented, it's now time to introduce our next awardee. We are pleased that we have a two-time winner joining us in a moment. That is Durai Sundaramurthy. Durai joined WashU Olin in 2011, and he is a professor of practice in data analytics. In addition to having won the Olin Award, he's won the Reed Teaching Award, Outstanding Faculty Member. He was the 2015 Emerson Excellence in Teaching Award. And he's got this great paper here on ventilators that he's going to talk to us about. Please help me congratulate and welcome Durai to the podium.
So Nick had a nice strong presentation. I hope I'm not going to bore you guys. Last time I presented, for the Olin Award, I suggested to get caffeine and desserts. I just remembered. Maybe I'll give the same suggestion again one more time. So feel free to, walk to the food and grab some food. Dean Mazio, thank you so much for introducing me. I also want to thank Mr. Mahoney for endowing this award. And more importantly, he spends significant amount of time together with his committee every year in figuring out the winner by reading all these papers. Prior to COVID, I used to interact with him quite often, and I have seen, we used to be right next to each other, upstairs. And I used to see him, giving his time generously to faculty and students. So I really appreciate all that he does for Olin. This award is very special to us. It's a great honor, and it gives us encouragement to do the kind of things that we are doing. I also thank Vice Dean Mark Leary and the Olin team for putting together this wonderful event for us to present. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I take this opportunity also to thank and congratulate my co-authors, Olin co-authors. for being involved in this work. Samira Fazal is an expert in operations research. She solved the integer programming problem for us. Sally Tewton is an expert in deep learning. He solved the AI models for us. Hussain Amini is an expert in big data and cloud computing. He helped us to run the computations on cloud and get this done within a reasonable amount of time. So thanks to you guys. This research is all about how collaborators can share resources back and forth. The collaborators can be of any size. They could be countries or states within a country, or counties or cities within a state, or it could be small hospitals collaborating within a region, BJC, Mercy, and other hospitals within a small region. So we applied our research to ventilators, but this could be for any resource. It could be oxygen cylinders or whatever resource the collaborators want to share. So back in 2020, when the pandemic started, many of us went through so many different challenges. Personally, when I look back, it wasn't that bad for us. But when you think about the whole healthcare system, it was tested and stressed to the greatest extent in the modern history of humankind. So at that time, we were seeing, we were in Midwest. Sometimes when you were, observing what was happening in the other places. For example, in the East Coast, there was a lot of demand for ventilators. Things were bad in Midwest, but it wasn't that bad. So if there was a sharing model, we could have shared our resources with them and we could have helped them. So that's when our team thought we should create a model to facilitate that kind of sharing. So that's how we started working on this research. Our research has three models: mixed integer linear programming, deep Q learning, double deep Q learning. Mixed integer linear programming is a traditional operations research model. Deep Q learning and double deep Q learning are AI models. They are pretty new. Whenever I do some research, it usually starts from a need that we see in the real world. So in this research, obviously we were looking at the ventilator shortages. That's how we started this research. And we usually capture the need and reflect that in our models using data. So we use the demand and supply of ventilators data from all the 50 states as the input for our model. So our models took that as the input and produced an action plan, how to ship resources between locations so that we can reduce this unmet demand, all over the country. So I have about 12 slides, okay? So I'm going to use the next 3 slides to introduce the models, the 3 models that we created, and a few slides at the end to talk about important results. So at any point, if you have a question, feel free to stop me and ask questions. All right. There is going to be a quiz. Somebody asked me, actually, is there going to be a quiz? So there's going to be a quiz on this slide, if there is a quiz. I'm not going to try and, go through all these notations. In fact, if I take the quiz, I'm not sure if I will pass, because it's been some time since I looked at these, formulations. But I'll talk about this from a very high level. So our objective function is to minimize 3 measures, okay? It has combination of 3 measures. The first one is the unmet demand. Anytime there is a demand for ventilator, and if that demand is not fulfilled, that counts towards the unmet demand. The second measure is about the distance traveled by the ventilators. We do not want to ship ventilators between far away locations. if we can like find a ventilator from a nearby location. So we want to reduce or minimize the total distance traveled by the ventilators. And the third metric is the flyouts. Okay, imagine every night we put ventilators on a flight and ship to different locations, right? We don't want too many flights going between locations, different locations. So we want to minimize that. So our objective function is minimizing the total of these three metrics. And we have some constraints. Most of the time in this kind of work, you would see the demand supply constraint, right? We can't like supply more than what we have, and we do not want to send more than what they need, right? So we have to keep that in balance. And we also let each location fulfill its own demand before shipping to other locations. And once utilization starts, we cannot, take that back. We have to wait until the utilization is over. So we have these kind of constraints. The good news about this model, the mixed integer linear programming model, it's really computationally intensive, but it will give the best answer. No other model can outperform this model, even though it's computationally tough to solve it. But thanks to Hussain, we were able to solve it on cloud within a reasonable amount of time. I think this is probably my favorite slide. This is kind of illustrating, these pictures are depicting what's going on in the deep Q-learning model. So there is an agent. In this model, there is an agent, and the agent learns to take actions and slowly improve those actions by getting feedback from the system. Okay, then eventually it becomes smart, and at the end it takes very good actions, close to optimal actions. So in the ventilator sharing problem, the agent will figure out, from where to where, right? Send ventilators from one location to another location by minimizing the objective function that I talked about on the last slide, the three metrics: unmet demand, flyouts, and the total distance traveled by ventilators. So here is a little more comprehensive version of the model. You could see the agent is here in the middle, and it's getting input from the left side, the demand and supply input, and it is taking actions, and it's getting feedback from the environment. And towards the right, that's kind of the brain of this agent. How it works, that's kind of the brain on the right side of it. And it's kind of an art, to put together a network to make this agent smart. And we also implemented two policies in these models, AI models: normal policy and just ship policy. In normal policy, we let locations store ventilators for them for the future use at the cost of not fulfilling demand at some other place. I mean, this is suboptimal, but it's kind of practical. If somebody wants to, use this model, but if they want to, have some ventilators or any resource for themselves, for the future, this policy is kind of reflecting that. And the just ship policy will not allow, storing of resources for the future, for their own future. If there is a current demand, they can fulfill it, and anything left, they would ship to other places if there is a demand in other places. So obviously, it's going to give a better result, just ship policy. So from a high level, these are the three models that we have. I would like to, show some key results. So we took data from April 15th to May 7th of 2020, when the pandemic was going on. The demand and supply data in different states of the US, all the 50 states. So what you see in this table is the total for all the 50 states. So each row is representing a a model. So you can see the very first column in the table is showing you the unmet demand. And the second one is showing the total ventilator distance. And the third column is the total number of flyouts. And the last column is the total objective value, which is the sum, weighted sum of the first three. We weighted it so that you could see the ventilator distances are obviously big, because anytime you send a ventilator, let's say a ventilator travels 500 miles, it would add 500 to the objective function value. So we weighted the three metrics to get the objective value. And like I mentioned, mixed integer programming will always have the best result. You could see the smallest value in the last column is coming from the mixed integer linear programming. But I think unmet demand is really important here, right? Like we want to satisfy, all the demand. We want to send the ventilators to whoever, is in need. And you can see mixed integer linear programming and the double deep Q learning just ship policy has exact same number of unmet demand. This is fascinating. You folks might think, okay, this is a research done by this team. What's surprising? These two numbers are like same. But if you think about it, these two are very different models. Mixed integer linear programming is an OR model. Samira, myself, and Hussain are doing this. And deep Q learning, Sally and one of the master's students were working on it. It's like kind of two independent teams within a team working on it. Code is different. Computations are happening in different places. Amazingly, both models find the kind of like very similar solution and end up with the same amount of unmet demand. After seeing the results, we really like double deep Q learning and also mixed integer linear programming. So if somebody asks us to suggest which one to use, we would probably suggest double deep Q learning first. It has some advantages, which I will mention at the end, and probably mixed integer linear programming next. And we can break down, this by every state, and we have put like some, highly stressed states in this result, on this slide for you to see. And you can see, both models are very close, and probably in terms of the unmet demand, double deep Q learning is probably doing slightly better than the mixed integer linear programming by figuring out actions to reduce the unmet demand. So we can see these results by state. So here is a picture showing the results for Texas. I would like you to see the red curve. Whenever the red curve is close to 0, that's a good news. The red curve is representing the unmet demand. And we have 3 other curves. If you can find it, probably you can find it because it's all overlapping on each other. The green one is the green or yellowish one is the raw demand, and the darker green one is whenever we satisfy those demand, then that's counted towards served, and blue is rollover. If we are not able to satisfy the demand, fulfill the demand from the previous day, then that gets added to the next day. So that's the rollover demand. And you can see all those 3 curves are on top of each other, which is a good news. That means when there is a raw demand, we are able to find resources for that demand. So Texas, and another thing to notice, this is 23 days, horizontal axis, it's 23 days, April 15th to May 7th. You can see the raw demand is increasing in Texas during that period, and it's eventually coming down, but the agent is able to figure out a way to send resources, ventilators to Texas. So Texas, we didn't have any problem. Whenever there's a demand, our models were able to find a solution for that. So here is New York. New York is, you can see, the vertical axis, you can see the numbers are also much bigger than Texas. mean, agents struggle initially. You can see the red is spiking, but after a few days, the model is able to figure out, a way to satisfy all the demand. So whenever the red is peaking, you can see the blue is peaking on the next day, because any unsatisfied demand is added to the next day's demand. And the interesting phenomenon here, during the time period that we are solving in New York, actually the raw demand is declining. And New Jersey is very similar to New York. And Massachusetts is very similar, except the raw demand went up and came down like Texas. And the model did not find, a way to fulfill the demand for more number of days, for about 10 days. But eventually, we were able to find ventilators for Massachusetts. So we can do, we have pictures for all the states, but we wanted to show, for these highly stressed states. And this is very important. This is a very significant result. If you look at the first column for the select few states, the first column shows if you did not have any model, any collaboration, to share resources, what would happen. And that's probably what happened, right? Like we didn't have a way to share resources. And you can see the unmet demand, huge number in the first column. If we use mixed integer programming or the double deep Q learning, you can see, only a fraction went unfulfilled. Okay, so we could have we found resources pretty much for every demand. And I'm showing only the highly stressed states, right? Like if it's not highly stressed, we were probably able to fulfill all the demand. I've done like different work, right? Agriculture to finance to environment. I think this result is really fascinating. I think if we should be prepared. If something like this happens, we should have a model to collaborate and share resources, and I think then we can fulfill pretty much all the demand. So some thoughts, closing thoughts. I think we really like double deep Q learning. The important reason is double deep Q learning works like a prediction model, like a linear regression model. Once you build it, you don't have to rebuild it again and again. You can use it in the future until you think, okay, the system, the things are different in the world, maybe we have to change the model. So that's a great advantage, computational advantage. Whereas mixed integer linear programming, anytime you change something, or if the system changes or you want to change something in the model, you have to do the computations again, which can be very computationally intensive, right? It could take hours to solve mixed integer programming problems. So for automation, for deploying, DDQ and double DQ learning is a very good model. So we have some ideas to expand this research further. We would like to, consider sequential decision-making models, traditional models like dynamic programming. We want to consider stochastic demand. Right now, we use, our demand is deterministic. So that's an interesting way to, extend this research. And I am personally very excited about the last idea, having 3 agents, So going back to this picture, instead of having one baby to learn the 3 things, we would like to have 3 babies to learn the 3 things. The unmet demand, flyouts, and the ventilator distance. And we would also like to have a boss baby to kind of combine the, so each baby would suggest an action for, optimizing their own component. Then the boss baby or the boss agent can take those suggestions and figure out a good one, by balancing the 3 metrics. So I'm personally, I'm really excited about, that possibility. So I think that's all I have, and I really appreciate you taking time to come to our presentation. If you're here or on Zoom, thanks a lot. And I'm happy to answer questions, or if you have comments, please let us know now, or that's our email addresses if you would like to, reach out to us.
Thank you, Durai. My question is about the sort of initial conditions. So you're assuming that the ventilators are in a particular place when you get the learning started. Do the models have an implication for kind of where we should have them in the first place? In other words, conditional on having X ventilators or X resources that we will ultimately share, is there a way that we could work out from your research what is the optimal initial state of where these ventilators are, and sort of what would that mean for conditional on sharing the resources, having minimizing the number of ventilators we'd have to buy, for example?
I mean, the way we have done it, the ventilators are wherever they are, right? And they're going to different locations. And once the utilization is done, they would come back to where it was originally. But I think that your question or comment certainly is very important, right? Maybe we could optimize. Maybe some crisis happens. Maybe we can get all these important resources. Maybe we can keep it in an optimal location so that we can reduce the amount of distance it travels. I think it's kind of focusing more into our second metric. We have 3 metrics that we are trying to minimize, right? At the same time. So I think, possibly we can focus on that and maybe figure out an answer for your question, this is one of the problems, right? Anytime we want to make a small tweak, or we want to find an answer for something different, then we have to change our models to figure out an answer for that. So I think it's certainly doable, but we have to tweak the model. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, we'll get that 2027.
Sounds good. Yes.
Hi, Dry. In your model, are the hospitals directly sharing with each other from one to the other, or are you using hubs, just like the airlines? Boston is sending to the New York, and New York Health Department is distributing to the hospitals.
See, in our research, state is the entity, okay? The collaborator is the 50 states. And they are sharing, you are imagining hospitals, but here it's the state has taken over all the ventilators and they are directly sharing, between different states. We can further, if you want to, we can include what you're kind of suggesting in our model, right? Maybe you can have a super entity, and within the super entity you could have smaller entities, certainly, that's a good idea, something that we can do. But right now, 50 states are the entities, in this case study at least, and they are shipping back and forth.
I know in your research it was assuming no new production, right? So would it be another baby that would be the, kind of assumed production then? And as you go into the emergent, I think everyone's, we're in an emergency situation, we need to produce. But the baby could actually say how much is needed to produce?
If we look at our last table, right, this sort of table tells us if we did not produce any more new ventilators, if we just had what we had, right, this is kind of the unmet demand. I think this kind of ties to what Dean Mazzi also asked, right? So this is kind of the unmet demand. Then from this, we can kind of try to figure out how much more ventilators we want to make, so that we also have some room, right? If the demand is more than what we anticipated, then we can fulfill that, right? We can have some extra resources. So I think starting place would be looking at Okay, we have like a smart model now, but even if a smart model is not able to fulfill the 100% of the demand, how much more we can, we need to produce.
So we have a question from the audience online. Can you explain deep Q, double deep Q, and mixed integer learning in layman's terms? Thank you.
Okay. So that's my mixed integer linear programming, right? Okay, so let's say we need to calculate what is 3,786 divided by 7. I just made up that number. 3,786 divided by 7, right? If you want the perfect answer for that question, that is mixed integer linear programming, okay? It gives the perfect answer. Nobody else can come up with a much more precise answer for that. But if I just want an approximate number, okay, so divide by 7, maybe it's like, 700 or something like that, but I don't want to spend too much computational resources. I want a pretty close answer, then that's deep Q learning or double deep Q learning. So double deep Q learning is probably little more, accurate and smarter than deep Q learning. So if we translate that my answer to ventilator resource sharing situation, mixed integer linear programming is giving us the best answer anyone can find, to minimize the objective function we have. But these deep Q learning and double deep Q learning models are learning like a baby, right? Humans, we make decisions. We cannot guarantee our actions are perfect, right? Somebody else could come up with a better answer than our answer. So it's basically a heuristic model. Deep Q learning and double deep Q learning, they are heuristics. It's not guaranteed they're going to have the best answer. I hope, that's
Let me just ask, what's the difference between regular and double in that regard? So I think you gave the distinction between sort of linear programming and the deep learning.
Yep.
What's the single versus double?
Basically, so these agents are neural network models. Okay, so if we make the neural network model more complicated, if you have more and more layers in the in the model, then that becomes a double deep Q learning model. And it's also like, how you pass the rewards back and forth, how you learn from that, it's little more complicated. So the brain of the model is little more complicated, or like, it has more layers in double deep Q learning than the deep Q learning. Sally is the expert. Maybe if he has more, something to add to that, I hope I accurate.
For double deep learning, we have two different networks, primal network and target network. For the primal network, we are deciding action. So as an agent, we're supposed to know that which ventilators we're gonna send which state. This is good, but we are defining that our action is a very good action by looking at target network. That means that we have two different deep learning model, and then we are comparing that system works very well. That means that it is more robust. Double deep Q network is more robust than deep Q network. So they are very similar, but we are using one deep learning model or two different deep learning models to decide our action and calculating Q values. For integer programming, as Durai mentioned, that we are calculating which kind of, the value we will get as optimal. Our goal is that we just would like to make sure that our agent works very well when we compare the integer program. That is the idea.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the paper. I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
So 30 years ago, states regulated the purchase of expensive medical equipment by hospitals and constrained that to make sure that a given hospital that bought, say, an MRI machine could get a return on invested capital for that, and they would prevent other hospitals in that region from buying that. That was dissolved about 20 years ago. And so now it's up to each individual organization to make the economic decision on whether to buy a ventilator or to not buy a ventilator. That's done based on their own economic self-interest. How would you incorporate economic motivation to incent buying up to the appropriate level for the community, the state, et cetera, and to incent sharing, short of military rule, we take control of these.
Right.
How do you incent BJC to say, yeah, we're going to ship our ventilators out, as opposed to we might have need next week?
Right. I mean, certainly we had to change a lot in this model, right? Like we had to, right now, we do not have any of those, variables or constraints in our model, right? So our objective function, it's all about like how to efficiently ship from one location to another location, how to fulfill all the demand. Now the times are different, right? It's not like in middle of pandemic. So you have, great, question. The economic variables are really important. So we had to bring that into the model. We had to bring that in as variables, constraints, as part of the objective function. Then we could, incorporate those things.
And then, the second part of my question is admittedly a somewhat self-interest one, is to my knowledge, there's no operational infrastructure to provide the real-time data by facility for piece of equipment X to say, okay, how do we optimize this piece of equipment, ventilators, next week's it's MRI machines, then it's X-rays, et cetera. That supply infrastructure doesn't exist to provide the real-time data. How would we go about creating the incentives to create such an ecosystem so we could apply a model such as yours to this? Because otherwise, if we don't know where the machines are in real time, it doesn't do any good.
Yeah, that's certainly above my pay grade. But, see here, our data is daily data, right? As modelers, we take, what's available to us, and like we are trying to do the best, within what's available to us. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, those are all like really important. Yeah, we need like real data, live, as soon as possible. I hope, this kind of forum and these kind of research, these kind of questions and interactions will convince like decision makers to, think about like what to do,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Stay here. Okay, I'm gonna introduce Mark Leary. Mark is the Co-Vice Dean of Faculty and Research and a professor in finance here at Olin. As Derai mentioned, Mark spearheaded the organization and evaluation here, so thanks very much to Mark for his work in getting this started. And I let Mark take over the microphone while we make the award.
Okay. I think I'm mic'd up here, so you can hold that one or take it down. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think the great thing about the Olin Award is that it, at the same time encourages and also recognizes research that really has an impact on business practice and potential to influence business results. And that, certainly is characteristic of the two papers that we just heard presented here. And really representative of all of the submissions that we had. We had a really high quality set of submissions for the Olin Award this year. And so I wanted to just take a minute to thank all the faculty members who submitted to this year's award, and also all of the judges. I know we have a few of those with us today who invested a lot of time and energy into reading and reviewing these papers for us, and that was crucial to this whole process. So our last order of business for today is to convey the awards to Nick and Derai. Nick, I guess you're still on with us. We'll have to do this sort of spiritually from afar, but you will have those when you return. So And before we do so, I'll just acknowledge again that our ability to do this is only because of the generosity of Dick Mahoney in supporting this award. And so I want to express thanks to him as well for his continued support through the years for this. So there are two elements to the awards. The most exciting one is the Crystal Award that Mike is holding here, engraved with 2024 Olin Award and the names of the co-authors, Rai on behalf of Sali and Hussein and Samira as well. And then the least, less exciting part is the big check. Again, thanks to Mr. Mahoney. And good thing it has a big check today because we have two papers and one paper with multiple co-authors, so you all get to share it. But congratulations on that as well.
All right, we got to take a
Thanks.
picture
Yeah.
of the check.
Okay. Yeah. You guys want to come on?
Yeah. All right, let's take one with me and Mark and Durai first. Okay. And what just you guys?
Okay.
They can hold the video.
Can't go.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that concludes our program for today. If you found this research compelling and would like a copy of the papers, please let us know and we can email you a link to the papers themselves and you can nerd out over all the gritty details. And for those of you who are friends of Olin, just know that all of our professors are always eager to connect with you to talk about solutions to business problems, share data, and further research. So if you have an interest in those opportunities, please reach out to me or to one of our faculty members or staff. And with that, I just want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us for the 2024 Olin Award. And thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.